For years, you've probably heard that lifting weights after a certain age is risky, that it puts too much strain on your joints, that you should stick to gentler activities like walking or swimming.
And look, I'll be honest, I followed this advice myself for years before I read this study. I'm 64 now. I remember my doctor telling me when I turned 60, Robert, take it easy on the joints, stick to walking. And I thought, okay, that makes sense. Protect the knees, protect the back.
It does make sense on the surface. But here's what the evidence actually shows that advice, well intentioned as it is, might be the single biggest thing keeping older adults from maintaining their independence, their mobility, and even their cognitive function as they age.
But even cognitive function, we're talking about lifting weights and brain health in the same conversation.
We absolutely are. And the connection is more direct than most people realize. But let me back up and start with the foundation here.
Please do, because I feel like everything I thought I knew about exercise after 60 is about to be turned on its head.
That's actually exactly what happened to me when I first dug into this research. So let's start with a number that stopped me in my tracks. From around age 30, adults lose between 3 and 8% of their muscle mass per decade. And after age 60, that rate accelerates.
3 to 8% per decade. So by the time I'm 70, I could have lost 30% or more of my muscle.
That's exactly right. This process has a name, sarcopenia. It's age-related muscle loss, and it's one of the most under-recognized health challenges facing aging populations. A 2022 study published in the Journal of Cachexia, Sarcopenia and Muscle estimated that sarcopenia affects up to 30% of adults over 60, and many don't even know they have it.
And that matters because muscle is important for more than just looking fit.
That's the key insight right there. Muscle is not cosmetic. It's not about how you look. Muscle is your metabolic and structural reserve. Think of it as your body's savings account for vitality. When illness hits, when you have surgery, when you take a fall, it's your muscle mass that determines how quickly you recover, whether you maintain your independence, and in many cases, whether you survive.
That's a heavy statement, Claire. Recovery from a fall. That's a serious concern at my age. I know several friends who had a fall, broke a hip, and never really bounced back the same way.
It's one of the most heartbreaking things I see in my practice, Robert, and the research backs this up. A 2018 study in the Journal of Bone and Mineral Research found that for every 1% increase in muscle mass, the risk of falling dropped by roughly 3%. 3% per 1% of muscle. That's a remarkably direct relationship.
So by letting muscle waste away, I'm essentially increasing my fall risk every single year. And I thought I was being careful by taking it easy.
And here's the part that really connects the dots. The common belief is that as we age, it's normal to get weaker, to slow down, to lose our balance. And people adjust their lives around that assumption. They stop lifting things, they stop climbing stairs if they can avoid it, they choose the elevator, they sit more, and each of those choices individually seems sensible, but collectively they accelerate the very decline everyone is trying to avoid.
So the opposite of what I've been doing is actually what I should be doing. Instead of protecting myself by doing less, I should be doing more. Specifically strength training.
Exactly, but let me be precise about what the research actually recommends, because this is where fitness industry myths often take over and confuse people.
I'm ready. What does the science actually say?
Let me start with a landmark study that really shifted my thinking. A 2019 paper in the British Journal of Sports Medicine analyzed 56 different studies on strength training in adults over 60, and I'm talking about thousands of participants across multiple countries.
56 studies combined. That's a lot of data.
It is. And the conclusion was clear. Progressive resistance training. That's a fancy term for strength training where you gradually increase the weight or resistance over time, showed significant improvements in muscle strength, muscle mass, and physical function in adults over 60, even those in their 80s and 90s.
Even people in their 80s and 90s can build muscle. I thought muscle building was something that stopped after a certain age.
That's another myth that the evidence firmly overturns. A 2017 study in the Journal of the American Geriatric Society specifically looked at adults over 80 who did resistance training twice a week for 12 weeks. They saw measurable increases in muscle fiber size and strength. The muscles responded basically the same way younger adults' muscles respond, just maybe a bit more slowly, but the adaptation was real.
That's remarkable. So there's no expiration date on getting stronger. The body keeps responding.
It does. And this is where I want to highlight a specific mechanism that makes this particularly important. When you do strength training, you're not just building muscle, you're also putting mechanical tension on your bones, which stimulates bone-forming cells called osteoblasts. This is one of the most effective ways to prevent or slow down osteoporosis.
So strength training doesn't just help the muscles, it literally strengthens the skeleton.
Precisely. A 2020 meta-analysis in Osteoporosis International found that resistance training increased bone mineral density in the spine and hip, two of the most common fracture sites, in postmenopausal women. The effect was modest but statistically significant, and when combined with impact exercises like jumping or brisk walking, the effect was even stronger.
I have to say, every time I thought about strength training, I pictured a gym full of grunting young guys lifting huge barbells. The idea that it's actually medical prevention for falls and fractures, that changes everything.
And we haven't even gotten to the brain connection yet.
Oh, right, you mentioned cognitive function earlier. How does lifting weights affect the brain?
This is the part that fascinates me most, Robert. There's a growing body of research showing that resistance training has direct effects on brain health and cognitive function. A 2021 study in the journal Neuroimage Clinical looked at older adults who did twice weekly resistance training for 6 months. The researchers found increased blood flow to key areas of the brain involved in memory and executive function. That's your ability to plan, focus, and multitask.
So resistance training literally changes blood flow patterns in the brain?
It does. And there's an even more compelling finding. A randomized controlled trial published in the Journal of the American Geriatric Society in 2019 found that older adults who did resistance training twice a week for 12 months showed significant improvements in cognitive function compared to a control group that only did stretching and balance exercises.
12 months is a serious study duration. That's not a quick fix.
Exactly. And here's the mechanism that explains why. Strength training promotes the release of a protein called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF for short. Think of BDNF as fertilizer for your brain. It supports the survival of existing neurons and encourages the growth of new ones.
So every time I do a squat or a lunge, I'm fertilizing my brain.
That's a perfect way to put it. Every squat, every lunge, every push-up is sending a signal to your body that says, we need this muscle, we need this bone density, we need this neural connection. And the body responds. It adapts. It gets stronger, denser, more connected.
Okay, I'm convinced. But now comes the practical question, the one I think most listeners are probably thinking right now. What do I actually do? How do I start strength training at my age without hurting myself?
That's the right question. And here's where I want to be very specific, because the biggest barrier I see in my practice isn't motivation, it's fear of doing it wrong. So let me give you a clear, research-backed starting point.
Please?
The American College of Sports Medicine recommends that older adults do strength training at least 2 days per week, with exercises targeting all major muscle groups legs, hips, back, chest, abdomen, shoulders, and arms. For each exercise, aim for 2 to 3 sets of 8 to 12 repetitions.
2 to 3 sets of 8 to 12 reps. That's a concrete target. I can work with that.
And here's the nuance that matters. The weight should be heavy enough that the last 2 to 3 repetitions of each set feel challenging. You shouldn't be able to easily do 15 or 20 reps. That's what stimulates muscle adaptation. If you can do 15 reps easily, it's time to increase the weight slightly.
So the key is progressive overload, gradually increasing the challenge.
Exactly. And you don't need a gym to do this. Bodyweight exercises are a perfectly valid starting point for many people. Squats, lunges, push ups against a wall, or on your knees, seated rows using resistance bands. The research is very clear that bodyweight and resistance band training produce meaningful strength gains in older adults when done consistently with progressive overload.
That's encouraging. I was worried you were going to tell me I needed a gym membership and a personal trainer just to get started.
Not at all. But I do want to add one important caveat. Form matters enormously. The research consistently shows that supervised or guided training, especially in the first few weeks, leads to better outcomes and lower injury risk. So, if you can work with a qualified trainer who has experience with older adults, even for just a few sessions to learn proper form, that's an excellent investment.
And for someone like me who has some existing knee issues, nothing serious, but I feel a little twinge when I squat, what's the advice?
That's a perfect example of when you need to work with your individual body. The research supports that most knee issues actually improve with appropriate strength training because stronger quadriceps and hamstrings stabilize the knee joint. But the key words are appropriate and proper form. If there's any existing condition, that's absolutely something to discuss with your doctor or a physical therapist before starting a new program.
So it's not don't do it, it's do it with guidance.
Exactly. The evidence is overwhelmingly clear that the risks of not strength training far outweigh the risks of doing it properly. Sarcopenia, osteoporosis, increased fall risk, cognitive decline, those are the real dangers. Strength training is the intervention.
I want to come back to something you mentioned earlier about the blue zones. You said there was an insight from Okinawa.
Yes, and it's one of my favorite examples because it shows that this isn't something new or trendy. In Okinawa, one of the world's blue zones where people live exceptionally long, healthy lives, the older adults maintain a practice called moai, small social groups that stay active together. But there's a specific physical practice that stands out.
What is it?
Many older Okinawans practice a simple daily movement pattern that includes getting up and down from the floor multiple times, sometimes 30 or 40 times a day. This involves deep squats sitting on the floor, rising without using hands. This single practice maintains leg strength, balance, and mobility well into old age.
Getting up and down from the floor. That's so simple. But I can see how that would work. Everything, legs, core, balance.
It's a perfect example of functional strength training that's embedded in daily life. The research actually backs this up. A 2021 study in the European Journal of Preventive Cardiology found that the ability to get up from a seated position on the floor without using your hands is a strong predictor of longevity.
Let me guess, people who could do it were more likely to live longer.
Exactly. The study followed over 2,000 adults aged 51 to 80 for more than 6 years. Those who needed multiple supports to get up from the floor were significantly more likely to die during the follow-up period compared to those who could rise in one smooth motion.
That's sobering, but also empowering because it's a skill you can practice and improve.
That's exactly the right mindset. And here's my favorite part of this. The improvements happen quickly. In that study I mentioned earlier, the one with adults over 80 doing resistance training for 12 weeks, the strength gains showed measurable improvement in just 4 to 6 weeks.
4 to 6 weeks. So by the time I've been doing it for a month and a half, I'm already stronger and safer from falls.
Based on the evidence, yes. And the effect compounds over time. A 2020 study in the Journal of Applied Physiology found that older adults who maintained a strength training program for a year not only maintained their muscle mass, they actually increased it by an average of 8%.
8% more muscle at 65 years old. That's getting back years of decline.
That's exactly how I frame it to my clients. You're not trying to become a bodybuilder, you're buying back functional years. Every pound of muscle you rebuild is a pound that helps you carry groceries, get out of a chair, catch yourself if you trip, and recover faster if you do fall.
I want to ask about a common concern that I know a lot of people my age have. Does strength training increase blood pressure? Is it safe for the heart?
That's an excellent question, and the evidence here is really interesting. The acute effect during the actual lift, yes, blood pressure does rise temporarily, but the long term effect of consistent strength training is actually a reduction in resting blood pressure.
So the short term spike isn't dangerous for most people?
For most people without uncontrolled hypertension or other cardiovascular conditions, no. A 2019 meta-analysis in the journal Hypertension found that regular resistance training reduced systolic blood pressure by an average of 3 to 4 millimeters of mercury, comparable to some medications. The key is proper breathing technique. Holding your breath during a heavy lift causes a dramatic spike in blood pressure. Learning to exhale during the exertion phase is critical.
Breathe out when you lift. Breathe in when you lower. That's the pattern?
Exactly. And that's another reason I recommend working with a trainer initially. They'll coach you on breathing form and appropriate starting weights.
Let me ask about another thing I've heard. Some people say that strength training will make you bulky, especially women. Is there any truth to that?
This is one of the most persistent myths in the fitness industry, and I'm glad you brought it up. The evidence is very clear that typical strength training does not cause significant muscle bulk in most people, especially in older adults and especially in women.
Why not? If you're building muscle, shouldn't it get bigger?
Muscle size increase, what's called hypertrophy, requires very specific conditions. You need high volume training, progressively heavier weights, and most importantly, sufficient caloric intake, particularly protein. Most older adults who start strength training see noticeable improvements in strength and tone, but not significant bulk. The muscle becomes denser and more functional without necessarily becoming larger.
That's reassuring. I think a lot of women, especially, avoid strength training because they don't want to bulk up. So the research says that's not really a concern.
That's exactly right. And in fact, for women over 50, the concern about bone density and fall risk is often even greater than for men because of the drop in estrogen after menopause. Estrogen has a protective effect on bone density. When it drops, bone loss accelerates. Strength training becomes even more critical for women in this age group.
So the stakes are actually higher for women.
In terms of bone health and fracture risk, yes. The International Osteoporosis Foundation recommends resistance training as a cornerstone of osteoporosis prevention. A 2021 position statement from the organization specifically stated that exercise, particularly resistance training, should be prescribed to all older adults to maintain bone health.
Prescribed, like medicine.
Exactly like medicine. And I think that's the mental shift that's most important for people to make. We think of exercise as optional, as something we do if we have time and energy. The research suggests we should think of strength training as a non-negotiable part of healthy aging, as important as getting your blood pressure checked or taking your prescribed medications.
It's a powerful framing. So if someone is listening to this and thinking, okay, I'm convinced, where do I start? What would you say is the single most important thing they should do this week?
I would say identify one body weight exercise and practice it with perfect form 3 times this week. Not more than that. One exercise 3 times. The most accessible one is the sit to stand from a chair.
Sit to stand? That sounds almost too simple.
It is simple, but that's its power. Sit in a sturdy chair with your feet flat on the floor. Lean slightly forward and stand up without using your hands. Cross your arms over your chest if you can. Then sit back down slowly, controlling the descent. That's 1 repetition. Aim for 3 sets of 8 to 10 repetitions.
And that counts as strength training.
Absolutely. You're lifting your entire body weight. It's a compound movement that works your quadriceps, hamstrings, glutes, core stabilizers, and even challenges your balance. A 2018 study in the Journal of Geriatric Physical Therapy found that this single exercise, when practiced consistently, improved leg strength and balance in older adults, and those improvements correlated with reduced fall risk.
So, something I can do in my living room right now. No equipment, no gym, just a chair and me.
And within 4 to 6 weeks. If you do it consistently, adding more repetitions, or doing it more slowly for greater challenge, you'll be measurably stronger. Then you can add a second exercise, like wall push ups or seated rows with a resistance band.
I love that this is progressive. Start small, build slowly, and the body responds.
That's exactly how it works. And I want to emphasize something important here. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to do an hour-long workout. The research consistently shows that even small amounts of resistance training, as little as 2 sessions per week of 30 minutes each, produce meaningful health benefits when done consistently over time.
30 minutes twice a week. That's 1 hour total per week. I have that time.
Everyone has that time, Robert. The challenge isn't time, it's the belief that it doesn't matter or that it's too late to start, and the evidence says the exact opposite. It's never too late, and it matters enormously.
I remember reading about a study, I think it was from the Mayo Clinic, that looked at people who started exercising in their 70s and 80s. Did they still see benefits?
They did, and that's one of the most encouraging findings in all of aging research. A 2020 study from the Mayo Clinic specifically looked at older adults averaging 72 years old who had been sedentary for most of their lives. They followed a supervised strength training program for 12 weeks. The results showed significant improvements in muscle strength, walking speed, and chair rise time, which is exactly the sit to stand exercise we just talked about.
So a 72-year-old who hasn't exercised in decades can still get stronger and walk faster in 3 months?
Yes. And here is the biological mechanism in simple terms. Your muscles contain satellite cells. These are basically muscle stem cells. They sit dormant until you put mechanical tension on the muscle, like lifting a weight or doing a squat. Then those satellite cells activate, divide, and fuse with existing muscle fibers to repair and strengthen them.
And that process doesn't shut down with age?
It does slow down, but it doesn't stop. The signal pathway becomes less efficient, but it absolutely still works. That's why consistent training is so important. You're constantly giving the satellite cells the signal they need to stay active.
So the biology is actually on our side if we just give it the right stimulus.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And here's the last piece of evidence I want to share. A 2021 systematic review in the journal Sports Medicine looked at all the available research on strength training and mortality, that's death from any cause. What they found was that older adults who did any amount of strength training had a 22% lower risk of dying during the study follow-up periods compared to those who did none.
22% lower risk of death from any cause, just from strength training.
Just from strength training. And when they looked at people who did both strength training and aerobic exercise, walking, cycling, swimming, the risk reduction was even greater.
That's essentially the strongest evidence I've ever heard for adding strength training to my routine.
And yet, most older adults don't do it. The data from the CDC shows that fewer than 15% of adults over 65 meet the recommended strength training guidelines. That's a staggering gap between what the evidence shows and what people actually do.
15%. So 85% of people my age are missing out on a 22% reduction in mortality risk, better brain function, stronger bones, and reduced fall risk.
That's the gap we're trying to close with this episode. And I want to end with something that I think captures the spirit of what we've been discussing.
Please.
Strength training for older adults is not about ego. It's not about looking a certain way or lifting a certain amount of weight. It's about saying yes to life. It's about being able to pick up your grandchildren. It's about carrying your own groceries into the house. It's about getting up from the floor without help if you fall. It's about maintaining the freedom to live independently.
That's beautiful. And it's a message I think everyone needs to hear.
So today's rule is simple. Start small, but start now. Pick one bodyweight exercise. The sit to stand from a chair is perfect. And do it 3 times this week. That's it. That's the starting point. Your muscles, your bones, and your brain will thank you.
And if you're like me and you spent years thinking that strength training was for younger people or that it would hurt your joints, this episode is your permission to reconsider.
Absolutely. And if you have any existing health conditions, please have that conversation with your doctor. But the question you should be asking isn't, should I do strength training? It's, how do I start safely?
That's the right question. Claire, this has been incredibly eye-opening. I think I'm going to go do my first set of sit-to-stands right after we finish recording.
That's exactly what I love to hear. And that's what we're all about here at Longevity Lab, turning evidence into action.
If you found this helpful, please like and subscribe. We have a new episode every single day, and we are committed to bringing you the science-backed health information you need to live a long, strong, and independent life.
Thanks for listening. Go do that sit to stand. Your body is waiting.
See you next time.
Take care, everyone.